Hello, Internet. This is the IPython / Jupyter lab meeting for November 13th, 2014. Um, let's get started. Kyle, do you want to talk about the nature demo?
Yeah. Um, right. So I guess big, awesome day that worked pretty well, and we had a lot of users. I think we're like at 11,493 is what Google Analytics reports from yesterday. So we'll have more, but it won't be nearly as crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing we probably had more people hit it during the whole HN Reddit spike.
Yes.
But we only tracked analytics if they made it to the notebook. So that's how many people actually got to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, awesome. High fives.
Yeah. High fives. That was some exciting load. Yeah, high five. Some interesting rapid increase in.
Nothing like being posted to HN without test when you haven't like written tests for any of the code or anything.
Yeah. That went okay.
Yeah, it went astonishingly smooth for that. I don't know. I guess Kyle is just great at doing CD-to-PS development there.
Doing what?
Keep in mind for the future.
Oh. Sometimes you just do what you gotta do. So the temp and B redirector Min put together, that's awesome. That's what I was hoping we would end up doing, but I was like, oh, I'll just keep working on these other pieces. But then Min wrapped it up real quick. And now we reasonably have a way that we could even distribute across regions. Like if we detect where someone is with like GeoIP, then we could put them on a nearby notebook server when we do the redirection.
Yeah, it's like the dumbest possible load balancer, right?
Yes.
Because it requires all of the things you're load balancing across to actually be on the public internet.
Yes.
Uh,
So I did look at some other like terminal services, and people are basically doing the same thing under the hood. And they put up an iframe, or they create this other window, but then they put you on this subdomain. And for a lot of them, they actually create domains for each individual user. So like their DNS entries are ridiculously big.
Okay.
And this was after playing with terminals.com or terminal.com. What was the one recently? Sense.io. They integrate with IPython in really interesting ways. I would play with that. It was kind of neat. Yeah, all not open source projects, but hosted and all that.
Sure.
And then the DAT project has a little demo thing.
Right.
And that actually spins up Docker containers too, but it's all like on the same box. But you'll see under the hood though, they put you on, like they route you to one of several servers. So like the one that I ended up was on, labeled C dash, whatever the try.dat URL was.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
It's also the amount the Docker sock in every container that gets launched.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up yet, but yeah. There's some security issues on their demo.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, so that was, and then we're down to significantly a more modest deployment than we were during the.
Yeah.
During the
Yeah, now we're like, we can handle 128 now, but it's easy for us to spin up new ones. Yeah, I'd like to switch that out for tempandb.org itself, but because there are so many active users on it right now and I don't have a migration path.
Well, that's what redirector's for, right?
I know, but I have to swap that in and kill out the old users so that I can redirect them.
But it's tempandb, like it's transient by definition.
Right. Just let them all die. I'll deploy it at like 3 a.m. tonight when it's daylight over the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I think that would be okay. And we can announce it in various places if there's any. If anybody's really relying on Well, no, I don't know, I think people are considering it to use it in classes and things. We wouldn't want to bring
I
it
think
down during that.
you're right. You're right. Yes.
But just to announce it on Twitter and the mailing list that, at whatever, midnight Pacific, or that's not the best time. But I don't know how many users we have that are like that would care about it going down for 10 minutes. There might be a lot of people hitting it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there are a lot of people who would actually have a problem with it being down for a bit.
So it was interesting reading like an article. So a blog write up from, I think it was Brian Keegan.
Yeah.
So he was like, I don't know how ephemeral they are. Like, I'm just using it. I think it's great, but I don't know if it's going to get shut down or what. It's stuff like, oh god.
Yeah, maybe we should make it a little bit more clear that it's super ephemeral.
And so
I see a use case for the blink tag. Yeah, maybe we should swap out the logo for blink tags like temp, and temp.
So I was thinking about like just cheating it, and we deploy the infrastructure for the try Jupyter stuff, and then direct people there instead.
Yeah, it's an idea. We can wait for Fernando to get back from South America and chat about that, because we could just wait for that before doing it.
So one of the big reasons. Oh, go
what's
ahead.
the temp-NV load kind right now?
It's about half full.
Okay.
It has more than the nature demo has right now. Oh, it's gotten a little better. Yeah, 69 out of 128 are used.
Yeah, so I think it's probably fine to leave it until, and then use the redirector for the next thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Did you want to talk more specifically about Try Jupyter stuff?
No, I guess. I mean, if I guess we should probably wait for Fernando and Brian. So
yeah,
we'll just do that next time.
NB viewer and domains. Do we want to put NB viewer is up on nbviewer.jupyter?
Yes.
But it's actually on HTTPS, which is kind of a problem.
What? Wait, what?
Because people, like, they'll say grab this JavaScript from a URL or something, and that won't run if the main page is HTTPS.
Yeah, that's a hard thing.
So we should think a bit more carefully about that. That maybe we want the domain on HTTPS and then render notebooks in an iframe where the notebook content is actually on HTTP.
Wait, so what are we giving them when we do HTTPS then?
Well, at least NBViewer itself is served from. Well, I don't know. That may be pointless. I mean, I don't know. But we should. The fact that the main page being HTTPS actually breaks things that people are using, maybe it's okay to say, you know what, you need to load things with HTTPS.
I mean, I would like to do that. I'd prefer to do that, but
yeah, I just mean we should be a little bit. I noticed that when we put up the nbviewer.jupyter, however many months ago that was, in July, I think. But we should just think a little bit carefully about that, because there are consequences to switching it to HTTPS. For an entirely self-contained notebook, it of course doesn't make any difference.
So if we just go back to HTTP though, for nbviewer.jupyter.org, we could go
we can.
forward with it.
This is probably another thing we should just ping Fernando and Brian about, whether we should just stand it up and redirect the old domain, or if there's anything else we should do about it.
And people are going to keep linking the old one.
Yeah, no, for a long time. That's true. We're not going to remove that domain anytime remotely soon.
Oh,
there's no reason to.
Have
but
keep something up that's always redirecting.
Yeah, we might. But right now we've got 2 instances. Is that right? Is it an independent instance of NBViewer, or is it just doing SSL termination and pointing to the same box.
It's doing SSL termination on that load balancer, and then pointing to the same collection of boxes.
Okay, so they're already pointing to the same thing. It's just
Yep.
probably want to alias IPython, or we'll want to.
Yeah, you have to actually do HTTP redirects.
Yeah, but that's easy enough.
I have a crappy project for that.
Okay. Yeah. Jess, do you want to talk about NVGrader and Jupyter Hub?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick update on what I've been working on, which is that I am now in the process of trying to sort of get the infrastructure up and running for how students are actually going to be like doing the assignments in the class, which is through Jupyter Hub. And so I have a demo working where Jupyter Hub is running in the Docker container, and it spawns Docker containers for each of the user servers, and then like the user Docker containers have access to the user's home directory, and that's persisted to disk. So you can shut down the server, bring it back up. People will still have access to the same data. So just like the first step, but it's getting there.
Cool. Any specific things that haven't been going well?
So the way that it's doing the like user containers is well, it works fine, but it probably could be improved upon, which is that it currently has to add all of the users to all of the containers, and then it runs the container with only the user that it needs. But because the user has to exist before it can run the container, and it doesn't know which user is going to be needed for each container. So
could you do an on build add user command?
I tried that and I couldn't get it to work. This might be a failing of like me not being familiar enough with Docker yet, but
I'm just making that up. If there's, I don't know that it works. So
yeah, there's probably a better way to do it. I just haven't figured out what it is yet. And then I think Kyle and I talked about we want to. So there's going to be like 150 students in my class, which is probably too much for one server, especially if they're all like logging on the night before to try to finish their assignment. Before. So we want to be able to have the home directories stored in some place on the cloud, like on Amazon or something, and then when the Docker spawner creates the user's Docker container, it figures out which machine out of the ones that are available to create it on, so that we can sort of do load balancing of the different of all the different users, and it doesn't like you aren't assigned to one machine because it's all on cloud storage, so it doesn't matter where your files are.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
So for the on build thing,
yeah.
So what we could do with on build is on build would add a specified like configuration file. So it's like on build add blah, and then on build run that configuration file or script or something, so that it'll add that specific user. And then when you're building those, so that means you have to build one for each user.
Right.
And then you can, like, we could either create it as a whole image name, or you tag them with that user's name. Like, as in, because you can do docker build -t jhammer / single user :RGB k.
Right, right. Yeah, that sounds like, I will try playing around with that, because that seems like maybe, I think the build time shouldn't be too much, like, I think, so it probably shouldn't be an issue, but that would...
Yeah, if the build is just creating the user, then it's not.
Yeah.
If everything else is already built, you had a base image, that's like no time at all.
Yeah. Oh, there was one other hiccup that I ran into, which is that for the Jupyter Hub configuration, is there any way to do like cascaded config files or something like that? Because there's like the config file that comes with Authenticator, and then if you want to customize that, you have to basically copy that whole thing and change it.
There is a function injected For the IPython config files that it uses, there's a function injected. I think it's called load. Basically, you can load config files from config files.
Okay.
So like if you just have two config files next to each other, you can say in one config file, load the other one
Okay.
with one
I'll look at
with
that
one line.
then.
I think it might be called load subconfig or something weird like that. It's not commonly used, but it was.
It
Yeah.
was for a kind of
It was for-
file inheritance.
Yeah, that a lot of times when you have a custom profile, you'll actually want it to extend your default profile rather than.
Right.
But I'm not sure if anybody uses it. That's why we added it. But
Great.
I'm not even sure if that's documented. Maybe it doesn't even work anymore. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it exists.
Okay. And then, so as I'm getting this stuff up and running, like if any of you want to test out the demos, let me know. I'll create an account for you, and I'll also be starting to deploy actual like NB grader stuff to the server too, so you can test out like that type of thing that I've also been working on.
Oh, nice. So are you gonna? I remember you had your Flask app for doing grading and stuff. Are you gonna just deploy that behind the same proxy, like /nbgrader?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. I think if I do that, then it will probably be better for other people who want to use this setup. For my setup, like we have a server that's behind a VPN, which is like nice because we don't have to care about security at all.
Yep.
Which we could also do that, but I might look into like getting it set up on the server as well. I'm thinking that probably what I'll do is I'll like create accounts for both instructors and users at least, so that the instructors can have access to all of the assignments when they're asking or when they're answering questions for students and all of that. So.
Okay, cool.
So, Min, do you think it would be feasible to run? So you're saying if we add the NB grader to the proxy, I mean, would there be a way to? I guess I'm trying to think about if you could use the same auth that you get in, but that you have the admin user that can reach particular apps.
You could.
I don't mean to build a CMS. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I guess any service running on that machine could use the same authentication mechanism that the single user servers do, which is, but no, be able to. The only missing piece in that is the way cookies are set.
Because they're set for a specific path.
Yeah, because we set the cookie on the hub path, and then we set it on the specific single user path.
Okay.
We don't set the cookie on the other paths. So, I don't know. There might be a way.
Maybe if they log into the hub and they like start their server and that like sets all the cookies and stuff, and then like once they've like logged into the hub, then there they can have access to the app if their credentials match. So it's not like you would still do everything through the hub rather than having it be like a separate thing. But
yeah,
could you set the proxy up so that like if I wanted to go to NB Grader, I would go to it at users tagflower for NB Grader.
Yeah, something like that.
Then the cookie path thing would.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you could. That's true. And then the cookie would be set. Intriguing.
But then I guess it gets harder, like to. If there are several people grading and I want to share a link and say, can you double check this answer or something, then it gets trickier because that link is
the wrong
specific to the logged in user, which it shouldn't be.
Yeah, we need to think some about the cookie approach. Maybe with something like this in mind, because we may not be doing the best thing. Scott Sanderson, the Quantopian guy, helped out a lot with cleaning some of that up, but I think we might even be able to do a little bit simpler, in which case that should help this particular thing. Hey, Brian.
Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I was talking to Quantopian folks.
Okay, I was just talking about Quantopian folks. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds interesting, and we can keep up to date on that stuff. Next thing, pre and post save hooks. So this is a PR that is a mitigation of the removed -- script flag.
Yeah.
It's very simple, but it still makes me a little nervous because, and all it is there are two hooks. There's a pre-save hook that fires before saving, and it gets the API style path and the model about to be saved. So you can use this to prevent things like saving outputs, and so there's the NB strip out script. You can basically implement that as a pre-save hook so that that information never even gets written to disk, which may be particularly useful if you're using a non-file system storage where just the act of saving it might be expensive. And then a post-save hook that is specific to the file contents manager that gets the file system path. And you could use this to replace, to implement NB convert to whatever.
You could also do NB convert to whatever as a pre-save hook. But...
Yeah, but you could, and some would be better. So we could get rid of the post-save hook. A post-save hook would be useful for things like if you want to add it to Git or something. In some ways, pre-save would be a better way to do -- script. But I guess having both means that users can do whatever they want. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if people think that having things like this is a good idea, if it's, or implementation-wise. I think Thomas made a comment about the events thing that we have.
Yeah, so I like the idea. My concern with it was that the way it's done at the moment, it looks like you can only specify one hook, one callback for each, and it kind of, from a programmatic point of view, it struck me that there's no reason you shouldn't be able to have a set of callbacks that are fired for this, and we have the events system that could allow that. The trouble with that is then I don't know how you like pass that as a config argument or something. We would have to, presumably we'd have to have extra complexity for there would be a pre-save event and then a pre-save hook, which you can is a single function that, if set, gets triggered on the pre-save event, and from a programmatic thing, you can register.
Although if only one thing is, if only the single thing is configurable, then that's effectively the only thing that exists.
Yeah, the other thing that it brought to mind was the question of notebook extensions, or server extensions. So we have extensions for the kernel and we have extensions for the JavaScript, but we don't currently have the middle bit, which is extensions for the notebook server itself. And I know that gets into the whole, are we becoming a framework question that is so much fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like the idea. I'm just not sure if we're doing it the right way.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's like with the -- script. It made a certain amount of sense, but we were absolutely doing it in the wrong way.
Though I guess mean, I guess this is close enough to what I think the right way is that we could introduce the right way without necessarily breaking this.
Yeah. Brian, do you have opinions on the matter?
I mean, I think it's a good idea that we have these hooks. I'm too far from the technical details, I'm afraid,
Okay.
to be useful.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll look at the event thing. I don't quite know how to because we could have a configurable list that you append to, and then that gets passed to the event thing. So it may not be complicated to do that. So I'll investigate that. Tornado 4. Yes. So the next thing, Tornado 3 makes me sad. It turns out Phantom.js makes me angry, and Slimer.js makes me very confused and surprised. So we've had, after the discovery of some issues with some changes that assumed Tornado 4 APIs, but just kind of happened to work on Tornado 3 in all of our tests, although it disabled things like authentication silently.
It's when you have a code path that sort of silently bypasses your authentication, that's when you tend to start going, we need to do something about it.
And there's just some things that Tornado 4 does a lot nicer than Tornado 3 in WebSockets.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of things got cleaned up in WebSockets, not realizing that they were cleaned up in a way that didn't actually work on Tornado 3. But Tornado 4 also dropped support for HXE 76 draft implementation of WebSockets, which is what Phantom.js still uses, because the version of WebKit in Phantom.js is crazy old. Because it's Qt WebKit, which means the version was frozen many years ago.
Specifically, it's Qt4 WebKit. When Phantom is built against Qt5, it can work, but then Casper.js doesn't support that version of Phantom, so
yeah,
everything is awful.
Yeah, so I really want to drop, I want to find another way to run tests. I want to get rid of Phantom.js and Slimer.js.
Plus one to that. I've been having
but that's not going to happen for 3.0, because it means basically throwing away and redoing all of our JavaScript tests with another front-end testing framework, which I'm sure will be similarly awful, just in new ways that we don't know about yet.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had found one that was better.
Well, Thomas and I were talking about that there's things like Selenium, that there are certain advantages to the testing framework being in JavaScript, but it doesn't have to be, because we're already running code in two contexts. The testing is actually not run in JavaScript at all, but it calls out to trigger JavaScript things. So there's the two contexts. If you've been working with Casper, there's the evaluate context, which is code that has to be JavaScript that runs in the browser,
yeah,
and the emulated browser. And then there's the actual test, where it doesn't matter at all that that's JavaScript. There's some thin barrier stuff where you can pass things back and forth that sometimes but doesn't always work.
Yeah, I feel like when we were looking at JavaScript tests, we said, Python tests are written in Python, JavaScript tests should be written in JavaScript, because that will make everything much easier. And it turns out that actually you still have these two completely separate worlds, and the fact that they're in the same language kind of makes it look as though it's going to be easier, but then there's all kinds of things that aren't really properly thought through, because because it looks like it should be easy.
Yeah, so there is an exception to that, and that's a tool like Jasmine, which actually there aren't two contexts. It just runs the entire thing in the browser.
Yeah.
So it's and the way it's kind of a weird thing that a way to run Jasmine tests is to you have an HTML page that you open, and it runs the JavaScript and then the HTML page is actually your test report.
Yes.
That gets run by visiting the HTML page. So there's some, and that you can run that headless. There are extra hoops to jump through. But increasingly, PhantomJS is not representative of a real browser. Right? I mean, it doesn't support binary WebSockets. It doesn't support patch requests. It doesn't support so that their rename is not tested in our test suite because PhantomJS can't rename a notebook.
No, I mean there's no doubt that the amount of pain we have in JavaScript testing is really high right now, and so I'm definitely open to looking for other things. I'm worried about the thing you brought up at the beginning, namely that we would go and spend a lot of work and end up with something that was just painful in different ways.
Undoubtedly. But at this point, I don't know. It seems to have gotten worse, not better.
Yeah, no,
I don't know. But anyway, that's not something to even consider for 3.0. So maybe I should stop whining it back.
And if we wait,
I do have to get one point in about Slimer.js, which only several tests that involve focus only run if the test runner window is in the foreground. Lots of tests fail if I let it run in the background. And this includes running with XVFB.
Were one of the tests the widget text box tests? Because they use hidden keys.
I think they were in things that involved clicking and focusing and adding elements. Where they were in regular notebook tests. And this happened when I was getting Travis to run the tests with Slimer.js as well. They were failing because, in the same way that I could make it pass by running the test and clicking the little dummy window in which tests run on my desktop, and then doing nothing with my computer for 10 minutes, test would pass. But if I focused my terminal so that the window was in the background, the test would fail because focus events would never fire while the window is in the background. So I'm just anyway.
So the workaround for IPython 3.
The actual relevant thing, the actual relevant piece, is this PR where we actually do drop support for Tornado 4. 3, yes.
3.
Drop support for Tornado 3. However, in order to keep the tests running on Phantom, there is a forward port of HXE 76 support from Tornado 3 that works in Tornado 4, but I don't really like the way it's done, so it is only enabled while we were running the tests with Phantom. So real users will never use this code.
Good.
Even if you run the Slimer.js test, it will never use it.
Should never use this.
Yeah, and so it's enabled by an environment variable. What is it? I called the environment variable.
Something like IPython draft 76 WebSockets for PhantomJS.
The environment variable is IPython. Yeah, IPython allow draft WebSockets for PhantomJS. And you get a huge warning if you enable it.
You were pretty nice when you named that.
Yeah, so the idea is that we actually do drop Tornado 4, but then we keep a hack as long as we still need to run on PhantomJS.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's... Yeah. I think that's a decent approach.
Okay. So we can go ahead on that. Payloads. I think this is the last message spec thing that we never got around to dealing with for message spec 5, which is our weird concept of payloads, which right now is a list of dicts in an execute result. And this is how things like set next input, which is how you create cells via load, etc., and the pager. And I think there are one or two more that are payloads. And so I guess the question is, do we want to try to spend time revisiting the concept of payloads and try to think about what we're actually doing with payloads and see if there's a better way to accomplish those things? Like the simple version is to just bump it to a message, like make payloads a message. Another option is just, I don't know, but we should either kind of commit to payloads as they are.
Yeah.
Like payloads are basically undocumented. Okay, Jason says they use payloads, so we should make sure that we talk to Jason about how to maybe try to revisit how payloads should work. Yeah, I don't think the functionality makes sense. It's not implemented in the most awesome way, so we may want to revisit how it works. But
And because we've always said we're going to revisit this, we've never formally specified it.
Yeah, so it's undocumented kind of because of shame. It's undocumented because we've kind of from the beginning we don't like how we do it, so we don't really want other people to do it because we don't even want to be doing it ourselves the way we are.
We're going to start a new trend in shame-driven development.
Yeah. So we should. The question is, should we try to spend some time to revisit payloads, or should we just document the payloads we use and just say this payloads, as they always have been, are an official thing. Here's how you can add more payloads.
I mean, I don't think it sounds like a massive amount of work to at least have a look at it.
Yeah, we're at the point of, we're at the point of saying, of cutting off features for 3.0, and it's a question of do we want to just say we ran out of time on this, we're going to commit to payloads as they are, or do we want to actually spend some time?
Let's at least work out what it would involve, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be that when we think about what it would involve to clean it up, we say, no, it would be too difficult. We will.
Yeah, because I mean, the simplest version is make it an IOPub, it's like a display message. It's similar to display, except it's a different message type because it's not an output. It's the front end it's the back end talking to the front end as like it's something distinct from an output. It's a side effect that says actually do something in the front end. All payloads the front end should do something, and that's something that is not an output of the thing that it's running.
I mean, the pager thing, I mean, that could conceivably be a display data message with a metadata thing saying put this in a pager instead of.
Yeah.
We might be getting rid of the notion of the pager, but I mean, it could be a metadata thing that says like make it possible to pop this thing out or something, if that's not possible for every output.
Yeah, and something but the simplest version of putting it on IOPub would make some things easier, but like there are issues with the payload system as it is now. Like if you iterate and then do question mark in IPython, you get some weird behavior because you can trigger multiple instances of the same payload. And one of the advantages, although it's maybe wasn't on purpose, one of the advantages of saving the payloads until the execute result is we could actually squash that list.
Yeah.
But like it only makes sense to do one pager payload, but it actually makes sense to do multiple create, set next input. Well, in the terminal it doesn't, in the notebook it does. So I don't know, maybe just kind of enumerating the things we do with payloads and see if we can.
Yeah.
John, how's the pager removal stuff getting on, by the way? Is that still a...
Pager removal stuff has been on standby while I work on the promise stuff.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Promises.
Speaking of which, how's that going?
So it's working completely in the web browser, and it's passing in all the Slimer tests. So all the tests passed with Slimer.js, as long as you focus the window.
Do they pass with Slimer.js on Travis?
No. I doubt it. It's the same problem that you've
If you
had.
RDP into Travis and focus the window, they probably do.
Yeah, they would pass. They would pass as well as they do in master on Travis. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
The same tests that fail locally if you don't focus the window would fail on Travis. But Phantom, I don't know what's going on. I've been banging away at it for a long time now, and I can't figure out what's going on. I've logged all the messages. Everything seems to be working. It's almost like it's running incredibly, incredibly slow. Like, I increased the timeout to 30 seconds, and one widget would appear on the page. It's really weird.
Do you think it's just that Phantom is broken with promises?
I don't know. It might be, but I also wrote some tests to test the promise logic that we're using, like all the different scenarios, the different ways that we use promises, and they all passed. So, but stuff gets pretty we chain a lot of promises together because we do like a recursive thing with widget messages where we're recursively evaluating promises, and you can get up to like 20 chained promises in a row, and I don't know if it's I really don't know what's going on in that case. So bottom line is it works in the web browser and it works in Slimer.js, but I haven't been able to get the test to pass on.
What do you guys think? That's a tough call.
And I'm running the latest Phantom in Casper, but like they were saying earlier, the latest Phantom isn't that. It's using an old WebKit, so.
Yeah, and I've run Phantom, so I did a build of Phantom 2, which links Qt5. In fact, builds Qt5, building Phantom, so that's fun.
Ouch.
And yeah, it does.
I'm also planning to convert the contents web service to promises. So maybe if I use it in that, and we can see if the tests run on Travis or if it's something specific to the widgets.
Yeah, that would be good. But so what I was doing today was just going through it step by step and kind of re-implementing it and see if I can find the pain point that's been causing it to fail.
Yeah.
But I'm spending a lot of time on this, so I don't know if you guys think I should just... I feel like I've been spending so much time that maybe it's too much time. Because I have other things that we want to get done for 3.
I think it just gets down to a question of what do we want to do about tests? I mean, do we? I mean, that's.
Do the tests run in? Yeah. Oh man.
Slimer.js passed locally. That's
They
it.
pass locally, and are you running it on? You're running it on a Mac, so you don't have XVFB.
Yeah, they pass on a Mac, and not with XVFP. And they pass.
Do you have a machine? Have you tried running it with XVFB on a?
No, I haven't. But
Okay.
I've tried on Mint. It works on Mint, which is a Ubuntu-based distro.
Yeah. Because if we can
I
get
can try with XVFB.
because it might be that we should, right? Because there are a number of things we only test with Jenkins.
Mhm.
It might be that we should bump the widgets to something that we only test with Jenkins.
Just to use for Slimer.
Yeah, because we have more control over. We can run it in a situation that has a window, for instance, on the Jenkins VMs. So we could consider doing that. But if you can't, maybe spend a little bit more time. Maybe Thomas can work on a smaller promises piece.
Mhm.
And then if the getting the widgets to run doesn't work out, maybe we can bump the basically say the widgets tests also get skipped on Phantom, and then run the widget tests on Slimer on Jenkins instead of Traps.
And then for 4.0, when we revisit the whole testing framework, we can.
Then we can
Yeah. The more we go on, the more I think that the only sane, reasonable way of doing JavaScript tests is in real, live, modern browsers where we actually run the code daily.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, but I mean, because that's what Slimer is, right? Slimer is a Phantom-like API, but it just runs in Firefox, like the Firefox installed, current Firefox. And so it has reasonably current versions of everything, but it has I don't think it's used as much, so it has automation and focus-related issues.
no, but that's what I mean. I mean, literally open Chrome on our computer and open a browser window and run it in the exact same context where we use it.
Yeah, and that's how Jasmine tests are run.
Yeah, and that's I don't know. It seems like even modern browsers themselves have so many subtle issues and bugs that are continually being dealt with. And think about the number of users that are on those platforms, and so it just seems like it's just not a very viable solution to sort of test in artificial contexts. But obviously, we're not solving that problem today.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's everything we have on the agenda.
One or two more things
Oh,
have popped up.
A couple things got added. Oh yeah, now that we have Brian back. NB viewer on the Jupyter domain or HTTPS. Did we lose Kyle? No, there's Kyle.
No, I'm still here. Well, actually, so I reposted stuff at the bottom because I didn't bring up the whole just move the repo over to Jupyter.
Oh, okay.
Since it's totally separate from IPython, like we can just. I was like, yeah.
I'm fine if we move the repo over.
Yeah, go for it.
And then earlier we were talking about if we switch to Jupyter and use the certs, it causes problems with people that embed JavaScript that is not over SSL. Like Chrome will actively block it.
So
that's
if you
what we were talking about
if you load a JavaScript library from a CDN not with HTTPS, then you won't load it. If you try to load it, it won't. And but with good reason.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, do we just go ahead and not do the SSL thing on the new Jupyter site, on the new MB viewer, or do we force people to have to use an SSL endpoint for the JavaScript they want to embed?
So why do we need SSL for NVViewer?
Because the entire internet should use SSL. There shouldn't be any websites that don't.
No, I'm actually fine with it in the plane. It is nice to have SSL because it means you get integrity, and so if you show up at an airport landing point or something else, they can't inject ads into the site itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then it helps us mitigate the kinds of issues where, like, if MB Viewer became any sort of vector where people could upload user content, like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I said it's a hard balance there.
The other thing that I'm wondering is that the same SSL issue, is it not going to also show up with Jupyter Hub deployments? Right? If everyone starts running notebooks on Jupyter Hub over SSL, the same exact thing comes up.
Yeah.
And so maybe it is time that we move in this direction regardless and basically tell people.
Although there's Jupyter Hub, kind of the normal way to load things is via NB extensions. So everything's coming from the same server, so it's all SSL or not,
Yeah.
regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are things like MPLD3, which say, load it from here if it's a live notebook, load it from here if I'm on NB Viewer, load it from here if I'm on a static. Like, I think it loads it from 3 different places in 3 different contexts.
But if people want to author notebooks on Jupyter Hub that will eventually be viewable on NB Viewer, they will already have to address this issue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
provided they're using certs on Jupyter Hub, which they should, but
exactly. No, my assumption is that people should not run Jupyter Hub without SSL.
So let's say that we have the certs on mbviewer.jupyter.org, and then we have to manually go to all these other projects that are embedding JavaScript to pull from somewhere and give them the SSL endpoint to it, or provide for them SSL. So like Cloudflare provides most base repositories that are common. They provide those as an SSL endpoint. So that includes Leaflet. Leaflet itself doesn't have one, but it's being rehosted by Cloudflare appropriately. I mean, the same thing for what Google does with jQuery and others.
Yeah. So question, if people start to load their JavaScript libraries using SSL, will that work if you're running the notebook without SSL?
Yeah, SSL is always better.
Okay, so that is allowed. It's not like it's a consistency check. It's basically
no, it has to be at least as secure as the page you're looking at. Because
Okay.
if you load insecure JavaScript into a secure environment, then you're basically compromising the secure environment. Loading secure something into an insecure something doesn't change anything.
I think it's a decent idea.
Yeah, maybe we should at least do a sample of notebooks on NB Viewer and see how many actually do load things from HTTP.
Yeah.
Because I remember noticing this almost as soon as I uploaded a notebook, but it may have been a fluke.
Well, luckily I kept some of our indexing data around, so we have a collection we can look at.
Yeah, because that should be easy enough to just say, look for HTTP JavaScript links, because it's only JavaScript, right? Is that right?
I think so. Yeah, you can embed images and other stuff. It gives you the warning triangle, but you can load it.
Jason clarifies that SSL is usually better, at least when the internet is not broken.
And
No, someone
WebSockets.
from Google was
WebSockets are
complaining that WebSockets didn't work in their environment, to which we said,
Your environment is broken.
"Ah, Google should do better."
Okay.
I've broken the internet and it doesn't work.
So I could bring up one thing about the try Jupyter setup that I was thinking about, which is we make a full screen iframe, and then that actually hits wherever the redirector endpoint is for the source, which brings them to their own. It does mean that they lose that like /user whatever jazz that they could then share around. I don't know. But then they're only on one domain. They don't have to know where they get redirected to under the hood. Basically, I'm saying like do the nature demo, like the same kind of look.
Yeah, just without the surrounding page content.
Yeah.
What problem are you trying to solve?
Oh. I just think that's clean. Like when you're on the page, and people shouldn't assume that they're going to keep that URL around. So if it goes to, I don't know, in this case, like right now, the nature stuff is like nature-iad- some server number.tempmb.org.
Yeah.
Right, and then as we add more nodes to our redirector, and like spin off the old ones. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to say that people shouldn't try to bookmark those. The page that people bookmark should be the main, like, URL that they got to.
Yeah, and if you refresh that, how do you?
And if they refresh that, that means they get a brand new server.
But that's not. That's probably not best, right?
Yeah. So you're saying like it should be a little bit more persistent if they try to refresh.
Yeah. And I guess you could store it in. You could store the iframe URL in a cookie or local storage or whatever.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. You could do
that. That's not a hard problem to solve.
So basically, you use iframes to hide
the domain.
Yeah. They can still get to it. I mean, that's not a problem. It's just
you can always open this frame in new tab.
Yeah. And then, so there has been emergent behavior from having the full paths. People will share notebooks directly that way. Like, we'll just take the full path, tempmb.org/user-whatever, and then pass them around.
Yeah.
Like, I've gotten emailed them. They're like, oh, hey, check out this one, which is great, but then...
Gotta get there quick.
Like, you gotta get there within 10 minutes or whatever.
No, but I think that's actually...
I mean, that's good. I like that.
I like that. I don't...
The problem, though, is that if we do the redirector setup, then we're... I don't know. I guess I just don't have a good plan for how ephemeral things are. Like, the server itself, not just their container for notebooks. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's one of the differences of with the redirector is the entire domain, the foo.tryjupyter.org actually will go away. Like you can't. It's not just that you can't assume that the URL path is permanent. You can't assume that the domain is permanent.
The subdomain, yeah.
And I mean, and this is just to help us like scale out and then scale back down again when we get smaller.
Yeah. No. I mean, although, I mean, to me, I think it's okay for us to distinguish between a very few number of URLs, of public URLs that people can visit and link to on TempNB. So, for example, we could have one that, tempnb/github/myorg/myrepo to start a container that has the notebook running with that GitHub repo checked out. Like, that could be persistent. And I think it's okay for us to separate those sort of public URL endpoints from what actually ends up in the location bar once you've opened a server. And I think having, and in some ways, I think having the eventual URL be as non-persistent as possible is best. We don't. I think if we get into a situation where they're pseudo-persistent, it's going to create more problems. And so I think, in some ways, having different transient domains as well is great. It really emphasizes to people, this is not persistent at all. So I don't know. The other thing I don't like about the iframe stuff is that with our new URL scheme for the notebook server, as you browse around, it's useful to look up in the URL in the location bar and see where you are, look at the name of the notebook, what directory you're in. Like it's useful information to go well.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Well, I mean, so maybe if we keep that in mind, we actually just do a full-on redirect for them, and they see that they're on some IP server if they look at the URL bar.
Yeah. No.
Another cool feature out of this that we don't have, it's not like we have code for this, but this has been kind of on my mind, is that from the redirector we could use GeoIP database to redirect someone to the closest region.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, give them snappier performance.
Yeah. Well, hey, maybe this is where we could use the names of the Jupiter moons.
The closest moon to you is Ganymede.
The closest moon to you is
Europa for Europe. Yes.
Nice. So everything, I missed the early part of it, sorry, but everything with the nature demo, things have run well?
Yeah, ignore like that downtime period, but when we got hit pretty hard with traffic from HN and Reddit. So I think we would have served more notebooks if we handled that and scaled the same way. Because like our stats are only capturing how many people actually open a notebook server, and we're able to like fully load a notebook.
Yeah.
Which means we basically served 12,000 notebook servers to people. So.
And how long has it been? 1 week?
Yeah.
Just over a week?
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
gonna do.
That's really, I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So we all high-fived. We could high-five again. It was fun.
All right.
Yep.
Yep. And are we good on that one?
I think so.
Yeah.
Jess, you had some integrator stuff to the end?
Oh, I put that
Oh.
ending line there. Let me find my little. I mean, I'll just sketch. I'm going to open up some issues on the NB Grader repo to summarize all the details. So I basically had an NB Grader sprint, and actually tried to use it for a real situation. And it's funny, the core experience of using NB Grader, once you get all the student notebooks in the right locations and everything is set, it works really well. I mean, it really does. I mean, that's not much. Well, I should say the assignment part of it and the auto grading part of it work extremely well. The first issue that I noticed is that to get notebooks into the right locations with the right names, you basically have to assume that students are sending you a random series of notebooks at arbitrary times with arbitrary names with arbitrary content. And every variation you can imagine. And I mean, I set up a workflow where I used a separate Gmail account with if this then that subject filters that copied files and auto-named them in a Dropbox. And everything you can imagine. Students would email me the notebook multiple times to different email addresses that I have. They would email me. They would have a late notebook, and so they'd email me 3 different assignments in one email, and all of those same notebooks would be named by my if this and then that trigger incorrectly. I would get notebooks where some of the notebooks from the students were empty, they hadn't done work, and others were full. So I had to literally open the notebooks to look at them. Some of my assignments were single notebooks. Those tended to be a lot easier. I had one assignment that was a zipped directory of a notebook and a data file. That one was an absolute disaster to figure everything out. And the issue there is that the students would change the name of the notebooks inside the zip file, but the main directory that got zipped was named the same. And so I can't just blindly start unzipping all of these zip files because they all have the same exact top-level name and an essentially random set of notebook names inside the zip file.
One thing that we did in last semester was like we told people they had to keep. So they would download just a zip file containing like folders like problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, and we said you have to keep those like folders the same name. Do not rename the folders. Do not rename the files. We're going to dock you points if you rename the files. That was like the only way we were able to. I mean. The first few assignments, we had issues like that. After that, people figured it out. But yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't know the best way to deal with stuff like that because it's just like you just can't predict what's going to happen with it.
Maybe instead of it. I'm trying to think what it would look like, but I feel like it should be possible to integrate it with Jupyter or something somehow, or even just have like a separate web interface that the students go to. So instead of like relying on the names and things, there is a box and the student, it says like put your solutions to homework blah here, and they put a notebook in, and it doesn't matter what they've called it or directory names or anything. The server takes care of getting that notebook to the right place. The student just has to drag and drop it or something.
Yeah.
Yep. No, that's absolutely. So I mean that sort of workflow aspect of it is something that we just have to think about.
Yeah. If you have a submission, if you have submission machinery, like web forms or whatever, you should, because it's a small amount of work for each student to say, here's my notebook that answers this problem, and then because then you'll have a structure that says this notebook answers this problem.
Yes. No. Absolutely.
And I don't know what the best way to build and or deploy that submission system. Do Google Web Forms let you use attachments?
Not that I know. I looked at that and I don't think they do.
But your own server would just fine.
No. So that was one. I mean, that's what I spend 90% of my time doing, was just managing that. The other.
Jason has just said another way of doing it would be to have a button inside the notebook that submitted the notebook. So presumably that would be linked up to notebook metadata that you could put in when you were setting the assignment.
No.
That would only work though if everyone has the same, like if you can ensure that everyone has like that plugin that does that, I think.
Yeah.
But in the button.
Jupyter Hub, then it's reasonable. But if you're not doing a Jupyter Hub, then.
Yeah. The other thing that I ran into was basically that I ended up opening student notebooks a lot. both in the auto grading stage. So the classic example is that I don't know, maybe a third to a quarter of students in one assignment hard-coded the data file, which was sitting next to the notebook using their full absolute Windows path. That was in their first cell, and so they got 0 points on that assignment. And so I had to go and open all those notebooks and see what was wrong and debug it and say, oh, well, here it is, fix those paths. And then basically everything you can imagine that people do in code, people do in code. And so example is that the auto grading gave them 0 points, and that's because they had the correct solution followed by a cell with an old solution followed by the tests. And when they ran it interactively, it worked fine. They ran the good stuff and forgot to delete the bad stuff. And so what?
They didn't like run all of the cells in order. Because if they'd done that, it would have caught it, right?
Yeah. And in some cases, that's fine, but like with in an exam, when they're crunched for time, things like that, they just don't do. Like they stop doing that. And so I ended up actually completely rewriting the form grading because I couldn't. I set it up and I started to use the form grading and found that I just couldn't do it without having the live notebooks open.
Mm-hmm. Taking an idea here from Google Code Jam, which is like when you upload your output file. So the way the contest works is you download an input. There's a description of the problem. You try and write some code that will solve that problem, and then you download an input file, run it through your program, it produces an output file. You upload that. If you've made some really basic mistake, like like uploading the input file instead of the output file, or you've got the formatting slightly wrong in the output file or something, it will tell you what you've done wrong, and you have a chance to fix it and re-upload. Whereas if you've just got the answers wrong, then it doesn't tell you. So I wonder if, like, in the kind of submission interface that we were just talking about, maybe it should run a subset of the auto grading, yes, and give them a preliminary score and highlight some common mistakes like absolute file paths, so that they have a chance to go and fix it.
Yeah. No, I think that having them be able to run the auto grading themselves would be a great thing.
Yeah, I was thinking of like maybe you could provide them with a notebook called like validate submission or something like that. And what that will do is you run the cells in that extra notebook, and it'll run all of the cells in each of the different parts of their notebooks. So like if they rename the notebook, it won't work. So that's nice. And then it can report like you had test cells that returned errors, like just so you know, like you won't get points on these cells if you turn it in like this.
Yeah.
But it won't catch something like an absolute path if you run it on your own computer.
No, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So another part that I found with the form grading, other than that I just absolutely needed the live notebook open, mm-hmm, was I found it difficult to there was two parts of it. One, it was really hard to tell visually, even with the numbered prompts for the score and the comments, what cell the score and comments go with. Like I found myself having to do a lot of visual hunting. And the other thing is that I found myself, when I did want to put a comment in, it was inevitably in a location where there wasn't a comment cell.
Okay, that's good to know.
And so I think so what I did for the form grading was I basically just extended the existing notebook extension, the cell toolbar, to have a field for the auto score and the score.
Okay.
And that, I graded a lot of notebooks using that, and it works great. I mean, the visual hierarchy is really clear, so you can quickly identify what cells have a score and what the score is, and that went really, really fast.
Wasn't like a problem to like open up each notebook.
Yep. Yeah, I just opened every notebook.
How long do the notebooks take to load for you?
Well, there's some. I think we have some problems right now in master with kernel startups.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, my kernel startup times are really, really slow. The actual notebook files load quickly, but I'm waiting up to like 30, 40 seconds for a kernel to start.
Yeah, I know some of the notebooks that I have for like some of the assignments that I've been reading they're fairly large notebooks, and they take, just for the notebook itself to load takes a while.
Yeah.
Which is like fine if you're only opening it once to like work on the assignment or whatever, but I'm really worried about, like for doing grading, if you have to wait that long for it to load, that's probably going to be an issue.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing I experienced, I mean, I agree, performance is a problem for large notebooks, and we need to fix that. But I inevitably needed to have the notebooks open anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it just wasn't. And then, so the other thing for comments.
Would it be possible to have a link, like to kind of have it both ways, but be able to say open this notebook, so that at least
Yes.
for the things that are going well, you can do it the quick way, and then say, I need to run this myself to figure out what the partial credit should be, and you do that, and then you only under those circumstances do you open the live notebook. Would it be possible to do that?
No, I think that can be done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we could. That you could choose like do grade with a live notebook or grade with the form. The form is going to be faster to load it, but then you don't get the code.
Yeah.
So for things like a written answer, maybe that's what you want to do anyways. And then you can switch between them easily. So it seems feasible.
But then the other issue is the comments. Right now, I'm just adding new cells that have comments, and the issue that I'm finding is that there are significant classes of assignments where there's really a round trip between the student and me, like where I give them an assignment that's a notebook. They give me back. They turn it in. I perform some initial grading, commenting. I give it back to them as a notebook, and then this process repeats. Mm-hmm. That happens with midterms or exams, projects, and I think the real issue is that we need notebook comments in general. Like that is right. We need the ability to have notebooks that we can add comments to and send them to different people and get them back and have the comments persist.
So I mean, as we switch or we get the features rolled in for like the Google Real-Time API and go towards stuff like Firebase, and I really wish I knew if there was like an open source standard for kind of the real-time messaging pieces, but
Google Wave.
It
Sorry,
seems
Apache
like
Wave.
it seems like if we had the same kind of commenting that you get in Google Docs,
yeah,
we'd be really happy, and if we could integrate with other APIs for that, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, no, and I think part of I think there's a balance that we need to walk here, and one is sort of the immediate pain that all of us will have as we teach with the notebook. And honestly, when push came to shove, my pain was great enough that I was going to optimize to take the fastest path to getting my grading done. And for me, that was writing a little bit of code and optimizing for my case. And so I think, and honestly, it may be for the class that you're going to teach, Jess, where there's bigger notebooks, that the form grading that's not a live notebook is really what you need. and so I think we want to try to figure out a way how we can sort of explore these different ways that minimize this immediate pain. At the same time, I think like the medium to long-term future needs to be that a lot of these things just need to be built into the notebook themselves, like commenting, like high-performance opening of notebooks, and I think there's a lot of just basic functionality that needs to be just in the project in general, rather than in some special interface. But I've got a branch. My branch is probably a complete mess right now because it was done only to alleviate my own grading pain, not with some grand, deliberate, carefully thought through design. But I'll open issues and follow up with this. But I mean, I had a lot of pain, but at the end of the day, once I got everything set up, grading was very easy. It really was not. I mean, I could auto-grade assignments instantly, record them in the database, run reports. I have a separate notebook sort of where I'm running reports. I even have code that grabs the student scores and automatically sends them emails that have a summary of their assignments.
Nice.
I mean, all of that. Like once I got through that, it was really wonderful, actually. Like I mean, I feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel here, and we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because, and yeah, it really. I mean, so yeah. Thanks for all the work you've done, and we'll. Yeah, I'm hoping we can set things up so you don't have as much pain as I went through.
Yeah. Well, thank you for using it for doing all of this grading, because this is like really, really useful feedback. I mean,
Yeah.
there's things we're just not going to know until we actually try to use it.
Oh, absolutely.
With my class, at least, like I know some of the issues that are going to come up already. So like stuff with like renaming the notebooks and stuff like that. Like, you know, we already came up with like somewhat solutions for it last year. So hopefully those hurdles will be less painful.
Are you going to have students email homework to turn it in?
Well, since we're using Jupyter Hub, probably I'll have something for them to submit it there somehow.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure what the right way to do it is. Maybe because they're using Jupyter Hub, we can have a custom plugin that gives them a submit button or something like that. But actually, if there was a submit button, the submit button could go through, restart the kernel, run all their cells. If it encounters an error on a grading cell, like pop up a message that says like this cell like is a test cell and like there's an error in it. Like, are you sure you want to continue submitting this notebook? Yes or no. That would be nice, and that I don't think would be too hard to do. So.
And also, I mean, another option is, because there'll be a terminal, it could be a command line based thing, right? They could go to that directory, type nb grader submit, and it checks it, gives them a report, and asks for confirmation. Like, I mean, that.
Yeah, well, I hope that. I don't think I really want to get into the command line with my class, because not everyone is familiar with it.
Yep. No, I couldn't do that with my current students.
Yeah. I think that will probably just like cause more pain for the instructors than anything.
Yep.
But.
Okay. Well, let's keep iterating on it. Yeah, but it's we'll get there. I'm teaching again in the spring, so you know, and that's a lot more students in the spring. So hopefully we can, you know, get that going.
Do you think you'll use Jupyter Hub in the spring?
Actually, in this context, yes. I'm hoping I could. I'll be teaching in a situation where we have a computer lab on campus. with a really good network, hardline network connected to the cluster, I'll run Jupyter Hub on. So yeah, I would run it.
Okay, cool. Because we talked about it earlier before you joined, but I've been working on starting to get some of that infrastructure set up too. So we can talk more about that.
Yeah, no, I would. I saw some of those notes, and I've seen you and Kyle going back and forth on Gitter about that, and so yeah, I will probably start to think about deploying Jupyter Hub on our cluster over Christmas.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Well, I actually have to run to a meeting, but I think Fernando will be back next week, right?
I don't remember. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Sometime, I don't know if he'll be back on Monday or not, but
Okay.
sometime next week.
Great. See everyone later. Bye-bye.
Bye, Internet.
Hi.
Bye, guys.